Hi, this is Amária Sweet with HeartMind Expressions, and today we have a good friend of mine, Alex Bloom. He actually has quite a bit of training under his belt, so I'm going to go over this really quick. He's a clinical psychologist working towards blending spirituality and psychology in a new way. And he's studied cognitive dialogues and CBT, ACT, DBT psychology, and some other things that he would go in. We're going to talk a little bit about a program that he's got going later on in the show, an online course that he has, just to help people with their spiritual journeys. I know that people on C4OC Radio and Revelation Radio networks really have been loving this content. And Camp Disclosure will go over. One of the things that I really love about Alex is he's got some pages called the Meme Gods, and they are so fucking hilarious that, we think about the shit that's going on today, the darkness, the hate, the rivalries, and what better way to do this than to laugh your ass off. And I want to just kind of turn this over to Alex and explain a little bit, what's your intent with the Meme Gods, and how do you plan on taking this, like, kind of with your psychology, your spirituality side, your humor, to really just make this a package deal to really help humanity?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I think there's power in the meme, right? Well, the word meme, let's take a step back. Meme just means that you are expressing an idea in a quick amount of time to a lot of people. That's really what a meme means. And now traditionally, when we hear that word, we associate that with like the word picture, right? That you've got kind of some sort of image with text on it.
Right.
And so memes are extremely powerful. There's actually, a lot of people don't know this, but a division within the US military that's just devoted to meme warfare. So this is very real. And, so with memes, as we kind of bridge that in with kind of spirituality, a lot of this is about vibration. And there's a lot that, we could go into with that, but it's about, keeping our vibe high. And there's so many different ways to do that. But for me, one way that the past few years I've really connected with is through memes, because once you see enough memes, you kind of understand the meme psychology and like its own culture, right? Like you'll get like a blank meme template of things that we keep seeing over and over and over again, but the text will be different. That's the beauty of this, is that there's endless ways in which you can make a meme with the same image. And so, through humor, it's a great way to share information. And you can also do so in a way that's light, right? Like a lot of these topics that we study, like in the quote unquote truther community, are very dark, very heavy. And so being able to transmute that through humor is a powerful way to not only express information, but also, and for me, kind of, this is how I got really started on it, is once I started learning this, I wanted to reclaim the power back. Like I felt so powerless when you come across this stuff of like, well, what can I do, to kind of make this better? And so to be able to spread awareness, but then raise the collective vibe in some sort of like a humorous way, then feels as though I can have some sort of influence with all of this. And so, it started in a Facebook group called Destroying the Illusion. And then from there, my buddy Angel and I started making memes. And then we were kind of branded as the Meme Gods. And so then we started our own Facebook page, just simply called Meme Gods, having, no expectation of really doing anything aside from just like a small little tribe. And it's grown from there. We protect it so we don't have it, open to the public. But we've had lots of offshoots. We've got Unredacted, and so that's for like, the dirty memes. And we've got a health section and marketplace and a newsroom and all these sanctuary for like spiritual memes. So it's been a blast. And we have a Teespring page now. So you can go to Teespring and you type in the Meme Gods and we pop up. And it's a trip. I got to tell you, when you see like people wearing t-shirts like with your face on it, or drinking coffee mugs with your face on it, it's pretty cool.
Well, you just got it when you got it, right?
But it's a
That's too
blast, you
fun.
know. And on my YouTube channel, I'm going to be making a video soon of how to teach people how to meme, because it's really not that hard, but there is some sort of like basic understanding behind it in terms of like, well, what websites do you go to and how exactly do you make it from just a mechanical sense? And then there's the whole psychology of like, well, how do you make a good meme? What makes and distinguishes a good meme that gets a lot of shares versus ones that are just mediocre or flat? And so I'm looking forward
Right.
to kind of putting that together. So yeah, so that's the meme.
That's awesome. Well, and especially with your background in psychology, you're able to
Exactly.
really marry those aspects so well,
Mhm.
which I think is
Mhm.
such an asset into this community. So
You have to have a hook.
hopefully when all this stuff is said and done, yes, you should do a book.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
be so cool.
Well, a
You should
book too.
totally do
Yeah, that
that.
actually came to my mind. But I also mean hook, HOOK. And so
Oh, okay.
with a hook, you because you got to understand from like a psychological perspective, people are just taking their finger and scrolling through their newsfeed. And so you have to have
Right.
something that's going to jar their attention enough to kind of pause from the scrolling in order to read your piece of art, right? And so being able
Exactly.
to have something that's catchy is an important way. And it doesn't always have to be through humor, but humor really is the best one for people to say, "Oh my gosh, this is really funny." They stop, they read it all, and then without thinking much, especially like on Facebook, it's so easy to just hit the share button. On Instagram, it's a little different. That's its own culture. But
Right.
on Facebook, it's a lot easier to make memes go viral.
That's really cool.
Or Twitter, right? That's another one.
Yeah, true. Twitter does have a lot of that stuff that
Hmm.
we've been able to see. Do you think maybe with memes you can use that as kind of a trauma release because we're doing laughter? It's kind of like reframing, like with NLP, you know, how we kind of
Hmm.
take this shitty thing and shrink it down and
Yeah.
disillusion it and whatever, and then just
Yeah.
get that feeling that you really want. So in
Hmm.
a way, it's kind of like we're reframing that
Yeah. Oh,
negative
absolutely.
garbage into
Yeah, no question there. So I have a professional Facebook page that's just my name and then my degree, Psy.D. And I share almost predominantly memes on that page, but they're all like psychology or spirituality related. And so being able to like reframe, like to think about a concept in a new way is a great way to kind of introduce psychology into memes. Not this psychology, but like the concept of psychology.
right.
And so that's kind of one. Two would be like through like an infographic or some sort of like education that so you read something and you're like, oh, that's interesting, or that's new, or whoa, I never thought about it that way, you know? So that's another one. And I think the third one here is like normalizing, being able to know like you're not alone, that there's other people that go through this through like just a quick, snappy meme goes a long way, you know?
That's a huge one too right now. I think with especially the new groups that are waking up, because a lot of us have been through this dark night for the past, what, 15 years or so.
Hmm.
And like seeing the noobs coming in, like their eyes and what the hell? I think it's such an awesome platform that you have that you can bring people together in that way to where they're feeling like, oh, wow, they, okay, yeah, hey, we've got a tribe here. And
Hmm.
so I really love that you do that. I think that's a great service for the community.
People
Now, as
often ask,
far
like, what are
as
some, just to kind of hop in really quick, people often ask, like, what are the biggest things that I can do right now in terms of like pitching in or helping out, especially like with the virus? And there's two things that I would
right,
say. One is going to be keeping your vibe high. And how do we know what our vibration is? We know
yes,
that based on how we're feeling, right? Our emotions. So, whatever you can do to keep your vibe high, whether that's through humor, whether that's through some sort of activity that you can do, expressing yourself creatively, so that's number one. And the second one here is community. So like you mentioned, like having some sort of like tribe or community in that sense, that we are wired to connect, we're wired to bond. And
yes, we are.
so during difficult times, especially like what you're seeing right now with all the volatility, finding some sort of connection that you can find, especially through social media, it really goes a long way. It's very important.
It really is. And I think it's helping to dispel a lot of that. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, things are getting worse, it's getting darker. But I think that it's really helping to dispel a lot of that negative energy when we're able to raise our conscious vibrations, put a little laugh on.
Yeah.
Sometimes, just being silly really
Yeah.
makes a difference.
Yeah.
With your
Absolutely.
online course that you're going to be
Mhm.
doing, are you going to be implementing the memes within this, or is it what's the
That's a
layout that you're
good
planning on doing with
question.
that?
I haven't thought about that, but that's an interesting angle. So the basic gist is there's a what and a how to it. And so there's really this growing call, and it's more than a need. It's like you're naturally seeing this unfold in the science community, whether that's through biology or physics, neuroscience, et cetera, of this kind of blending as the more we understand science, like quantum physics is a great example of this, then the more you see kind of a matching on to what we've known for thousands of years in wisdom traditions. And so for me, I've been on my spiritual journey for well over 20 years. And I would come across a lot of these concepts that, like, for example, how we are co-creators, right? That we kind of co-create our reality with source. And so we're not just little peons in a matrix kind of going throughout our world, that we are actually constructing our reality. And then the second component with that is to know that we have active volition or control within that. We are swimming in a sea of energy. Everything that we see around us and that we're interacting with is energy. So even physical matter is just condensed energy, right? So it's
Right.
energy is all there is, period. So that's like the building block. And then from there, knowing that we can in a positive way, I'll use this word, but like manipulate that energy, right? That we can influence, we can change what that energy looks like. And there's kind of
That law of attraction.
exactly, see? And so then from there, we understand this metaphysical principle that what we put out comes back to us. It's a boomerang, right?
Absolutely.
And you see this
Absolutely.
in every wisdom tradition. In the Christian community, they call it sowing and reaping. In Buddhism, they call it karma. But every tradition has their own phrasing for this same principle. And so that's really the what foundational concept for the course and the book, and even my YouTube channel, is kind of understanding, like, okay, law of attraction is you get it back what you put out. So that's kind of the basic nuts and bolts. But then the second component to this is how do we actually work with this in a way that we're going to feel like we have more like a better handle on what we put out, knowing more specifically like what we want to come back to us. And on my spiritual journey, that was one of my frustrations, that I'd read these books that had beautiful prose, and I loved the concepts that were in them, but it was so theoretical that at the end of the conversation or at the end of the book, it's like, okay, but now what? Like, it was a great read, but what do I do next? And so that's really kind of where I want
Right.
to have my influence with the understanding of psychology to enter in on this, that answers the question of how. And how I kind of came
That's cool.
to really map that on is back in 2006. This was right before the movie The Secret came out, where they really kind of made law of attraction go mainstream, that I had started to understand this metaphysical principle. And in other communities, they don't call it law of attraction, they call it just law of vibration, but it's the same thing. And so I'm like, okay, I get that. And then as I'm reading more about the specifics, I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, what is our vibration? And it starts with our thoughts. Everything that we see around us, like when you look around your room, is made twice. It first starts with an idea that you have in your mind, right? Like if it's a
Right.
chair or a pillow or anything, that it starts off with some sort of like visual or a creation mentally. And then from there, it moves into our physical 3D reality. And so how we create is initially through thought. Thought actually has energy, and there are ways in which we can measure thought. There's a device called a squidometer that actually measures thought energy. So this is more than just like woo-woo stuff, right? So we have thoughts,
Right.
and then from thoughts, we move into emotion. Emotion is energy in
Mhm.
motion. This is the catalyst, or the
Absolutely.
fuel, the juice that allows the thought to come into fruition more quickly. And then the last part here is going to be what sort of action steps that we take. What can we do, right? If we just have a thought and an emotion, but we sit on our couch and never take action, then good luck having things manifest in your life
Right.
very well, right? So you kind of have to have a blending of all three of these ideas. So again, thought, emotion, and action. And so that was kind of the foundational underpinnings for my understanding of things. Then that fall, I start graduate school. And as I'm in graduate school getting my doctorate in psychology, I'm learning about like, what is psychology? Like, what does that mean? And what I realized very quickly was that it's also made up of these three same components. It's thought, it's emotion or feeling,
Right.
and it's our behavior, our actions. And so I'm like, well, this is a perfect blending of, you know, these two concepts. And so then I thought, wow, from there, I remember in class one day, it just like clicked. And I'm like, oh, well, where are all the books that are written on this? You know, I'm psyched. And no pun intended. And so then I look and I'm like, no one is writing about this. There's like, you know, like Wayne Dyer was the only one who kind of like was blending
Right.
psychology and spirituality, but not
I
in the
think Joe
same way that I was
Dispenza
thinking.
does it beautifully. But
Who
I
is that?
think I love how Joe Dispenza,
Yes,
I think
Joe.
a lot of
Right.
what he does, and T. Harvecker as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
I did a lot of stuff with Peak Potentials and Success Resources America, and
Awesome.
exactly what you're talking about is what we did in like Warrior Training Camp
Right.
and
Right.
the marketing seminars and the business stuff that we did. And it makes so much sense when you get into that emotion or that feeling
Mm-hmm.
to where it feels like it's already happened.
Yeah.
And
See?
then
Exactly.
really getting in, because they always go into that thoughts lead to your feelings, that go
Mm-hmm.
into your actions, that
Mm-hmm.
create your behaviors or your
Yeah.
patterns. And so
Right.
we can create that new human being, like Joe Dispenza says, when we want to actually change that personality, we have to create a new person. And
Yes.
I love how you're incorporating the humor in it, the
Mhm.
memes, the just it's such a beautiful marriage of everything that you're doing. It's like all of these masters and it's a totally fresh look. It's awesome. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see, because it's all about our vibration. And again, how do we know what we're vibrating? We know that based on how we feel. And so the more that you
Right.
understand that, like, well, where does emotion come from? Emotion is nothing more than thoughts that are expressed in the body. And so the
Right.
origin of everything is with our thoughts. And so when we can learn how to master our thoughts, when we learn how to control our attention, like mindfulness is one of the skills that I talk about. And that's my particular
Yes.
background. You know, I did my thesis and dissertation. I've lectured nationally, internationally. I've had my own practice for well over a decade. So I'm, you know, well steeped in like the research end of things, applying it with clients, and then having my own practice. And so you see that there's so many gifts and benefits that come from this, but the biggest one in this context is that we learn how to like control our attention. And that's paramount. It's absolutely critical when we understand things from like the lens
It
of like
really
law of
is.
attraction, because we're more intentional about what thoughts we think and where we dwell and what sort of attention and energy we give certain thoughts. And that we learn to like control this or grow this muscle with our attention, that when we start to stray, we're able to bring it back. And the more, and then
Right.
it raises our awareness as well, right? So the more awareness we have, the more control we have with our attention, the more we can be specific, like with what you're saying of like particular workshops where you're going and you're moving away from, wouldn't it be nice if one day, or gosh, in theory, but it'll never happen, to more of like, all that's irrelevant. I have it now. It's not about future. It's about present moment.
Yes. Yes.
See? And so if I have it now,
It really makes sense.
it takes all the guesswork out. There's no like wondering
Yep.
or hoping, or it's a completely different frequency that you're on. And so then when you're able to come from that and then tune into that and have that linger long enough to have that energy in a very kind of potent way be sent out into the universe, then that is what is coming back to you. And I can tell you, as I was looking at the specifics with this, how absolutely powerful this is. I mean, when I started applying it to my own life, my life just bloomed. Like, again, no pun intended. Like, it just was like, you know, and like, I was able to see like, whoa, this stuff is powerful and I have to share this, you know?
Yes.
And it took me quite a while to really understand the depth of all of this work, because what we're talking about is kind of more of the basics, But once you get into the weeds and you understand the minutia, because then I had to go from there and really say, like, what is psychology? Like, how do I really fine tune into the how part of all of this? And that took me a good decade plus to try to summarize the entire field of applied psychology, you know? Because I was up like countless nights burning the candle at both ends of reading through research. And, there's over 800 forms of identified therapy alone. And then we have, a self-help world. We've got retreats and workshops and seminars and all that sort of stuff. And I'd find that there are recycled concepts that are continually being used over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm familiar with that idea. Or like reframing is one of those, right? Or visualization or mindfulness, that all these people are talking about the same darn thing. They're just using their own verbiage, their own terminology. And so how can I move into this space where like we understand what these missing ingredients are, what these kind of invisible like golden threads that continue to weave their way into change, all these avenues of change. And so it took me a decent amount of time to try to find all of those. And I feel like I've done a good job in terms of leaving no stone unturned. And so you've got 14 skills that are broken down into 5 themes. And if you know what these 5 themes are, then you know how to make a change in any area of your life. And that alone is separate, right? That alone can be a game changer for a lot of people. But now when you augment that with law of attraction and this understanding of metaphysics, watch out, because whatever you're wanting, now that you can fine tune the how with managing your vibration, then you're going to be this magical manifester and you're going to be unstoppable. And that's really what's needed right now, right? Because there's this great awakening that's taking place, and we're moving into like this new earth, right? Where we can learn how to be more masters. We are, you and I and a lot of other people are like the ambassadors that are kind of ushering in this new wave, this new awakening. And so, we need to have more tools at people's fingertips. So this is just one contribution to
seeing these people waking up to that. I love how you've broken it down so much. Because imagine like people that are waking up to secret programs, military programs, the space programs that are being disclosed. I myself is one of those. I've talked with Gene the Insider. He's a naval intelligence officer that I'm just blown away by the stuff that, when I was telling him my dreams, and he's like, oh yeah, there's no doubt you were there. And finding other people that are having similar things and seeing the PTSD triggers and just having a manual like this to know what the hell to do, because this is literally like, for me, it's taken 17 years of like studying psychology, studying NLP, studying hypnosis, trance work, meditation. And I don't have degrees. I have a certificate. So, for a stay-at-home mom, finding that stuff, if I would have had a manual like 17 years ago, can you imagine? Oh man.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah. And for, it's really, Einstein said this too, like if you don't really have mastery over a concept until you can explain it in very simple terms.
Right.
And so I think that's where like breaking this into those themes, those categories becomes so important for people, because we're in 21st century where everyone's busy. They don't have time to read all of these dusty workbooks or, go get a graduate degree and stay stuck in ivory tower for, 5 to 10 years. Right. And, like I've been a university professor. And so I've seen it from all angles, in terms of how all this works. And there's such a disconnect between like the theory of psychology and all these ideas, and then having it really be applied to the average person. And when I'm working with clients, I'll often say, look, this concept that we're talking about right now, this technically falls into the category of like a quote unquote therapy skill, but I don't like that terminology. This is a life skill. This is something that everyone can benefit from. I don't care who you are. And so these are like the basics of how to live life 2.0, of how to move into this space of not just existing and living your life on autopilot, but living your masterpiece life, right? Yes. Moving into your potential of how do I become the person that I want to be? And there's so much of that discussion starting to happen now, but we're staying in the what. which is like, yeah, the fact that this exists and, here's all these ideas of what we want to move into, but there needs to be more discussion on like, okay, but how do I do it? What are the nuts and bolts? Give me the basics here, you know? And so that's really what I'm wanting to bring to the table in very kind of simple terms. And I think memes, back to that, are a great way to, just one avenue, but one great way to do that, because if you can take a concept and summarize it in a few words and put it into a meme, then people are going to get it. And it's like, boom, you've planted that seed, And that's, you can have memes on any topic that you want. And the beautiful part
Oh
about
God,
this,
yeah.
and this is what makes memes so powerful, is people are scrolling through their news feed and they're not necessarily actively stopping like on your Facebook page and wanting to read through all your memes. They're just going through their news feed and they're just seeing what shows up through like the Facebook algorithms or whatever. And so all of that information, though, is kind of going into our mind. And if we can infuse emotion, this is why I like humor, but infuse emotion into the meme and into the experience as
that's such a powerful anchor.
Right? That then all of that gets downloaded. And then, it's like what we learned from marketing, that you have to hear something 7 times before it sinks in. And there's some sort of like familiarity and like a dot connection gets made of like, oh yeah, I think I've heard of that before. But there's a threshold, right? It takes like 7 times for that to happen. So the more memes that you can crank out, and the more you can reiterate this concept in a way that everyone is going to be interfacing, which is going to be social media, then, you've got a lot of power at your fingertips that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just blown away. That's really awesome. Because there's so much you could go into, so many areas, little nooks and crannies, and just to be able to break it down like that is phenomenal. So to kind of segue a little bit into, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Camp Disclosure, which I'm really excited about. I know that that's going to be a blast because I know a lot of you guys from there. The artist from Sphere Being Alliance will be there. I know I've talked with him. He and I are good friends. And God, you guys are going to have some awesome speakers. So all you guys that are listening, this is so worth it. I would look into this and really go, these people are fantastic. So go ahead and explain, what are you guys going to be doing in kind of like the theme of Camp Disclosure to kind of help rock people's world a little bit?
So let me kind of say a few words about live events in general, and then we'll go into the specifics. So my first live event was last summer. And for those who are in any sort of like truther community or interested in spirituality and wanting to know like what's next, what's cutting edge, moving beyond like mainstream, like vanilla topics and conversations, nothing replaces a live event. Because once you start connecting with people face to face, that there's like the shared language that you don't have to go into a lot of detail about because you both just kind of get it, or at least get the basics. And that was so powerful for me to have those experiences last year, because I'm like, whoa. And then on top of that, from like a spiritual perspective, there's such a depth of connection that you feel when you meet up with people in real life. It's like a giant sleepover that you're having with like your besties. It's absolutely amazing.
It is so much fun.
I went to one this past August called Dimensions of Disclosure, and I was speaking there. And it was like, 3-4 day event. And I only went to one half of one lecture the entire time. And there were, all the big name speakers were there. But for me, it was like, I feel so rooted with these other people. I just felt this calling that I had to connect with them face to face. It's like, I can watch the lectures later. It's all about
that was an
community.
amazing group.
So Camp Disclosure in particular, what we're going to be talking about is kind of looking at a number of different facets here. So we're going to have those kind of who are talking about healing techniques and like what's cutting edge there. We're going to have those who are kind of talking about disclosure in terms of like the alien community and how we can connect as like a starseed to our galactic family. What I'm going to be talking about is kind of looking at our superpowers. It's kind of how I'm framing it, kind of like what we've been discussing today of these different psychology skills and how we can be actively applying that, in our everyday life in order to be more conscious co-creators. And so I'm really excited about that. So that's going to be my particular lecture. And then from there, I'm going to have a breakout workshop. And that's
Oh,
going to be
fun.
fun because we're going to be kind of going over two related but a little bit different concepts. So the basics is like how to red pill. So how do you have some sort of like conversation with people about these truther ideas in a way that, like, I call them the sleepers, right? That like those who
Yes.
aren't awakened yet, like how do you interface with them? And because I see this a lot in the community of like where they want to fire hose a lot of information of like, well, you need to read this, or you need to like, watch this video or whatever. And it's like, you're at level 10 with your knowledge base and they're at level 0. And there's just such a disconnect. And then of course that's going to lead to fireworks and pushback and
So
them just denying it
overwhelming
all.
for people.
So,
Yes.
how do we talk with them? And then more importantly, and this is kind of the other real piece here, is like, how do we have some sort of like compassionate conversations for those who aren't
Yes.
interested, right? Those
Nailed it.
who aren't down with whatever we're putting down in terms of like, well, here's the red pill. And they're like, I'm okay with taking a blue pill. Like, I don't want a red pill. And this is kind of what you're saying, like out throughout our country right now of like the protests and everything that's kind of going on there. There are these explosions because you have such two different camps, right? There's more disconnect now than ever before in our country of like, you either stand with us or against us. And now like they're saying, silence is violence. So you have to voice up, you have to give your opinion. You can't just kind of straddle that middle line. But there's a secret hidden contingency that if you stand up because we're pressuring you to, but you don't have the right answer of what we want, now you're part of the other camp. And so
Mm.
now you're kind of game for us committing violence towards you. And so, how
And
do
it's
we
really sad when a lot of people take that do right stance of, well, I'm right and you're wrong. And I
exactly?
like that compassionate thing of not shaming someone into seeing your point of view, but at least
Yes.
showing them the truth in a gentle way. That's really awesome.
Exactly. And all you're doing is you're just, people say, well, am I coercing them? Am I trying to convince them? Am I converting them? Those
I
are the
know,
first
right?
things. And I say, no,
I've
you're
been
just
guilty
presenting.
too.
We've all been guilty of it,
Damn
especially when we're
it.
passionate about it and we want to kind of voice
Yes.
that. But in reality, all you're wanting to do really is present. And so you're just
Exactly.
offering some of this information. You're saying here, if you want to take some of these seedlings and if it plants, awesome. And if not, then that's okay too. And so one of the best ways for us to plant those seeds, again, is going to be through social media. And we can do it in active and passive ways. So an active way would be having a conversation with someone, but a passive way would just be posting memes, posting articles, posting videos, posting whatever, you know? And that information is then going to come across to others. And if they're ready and willing, and, again, from like a spiritual perspective, like it's timing, then they'll be open to it. And if not, again, we have to be the leaders. We have to be the way showers and those to model after, to say, even if you don't agree with me, that's okay. It's fine.
Yes.
Because if we get
And I
caught in
actually
that
have
same
that a
mindset,
similar. Oh, go ahead.
it's tit for tat, right? Then we're at the same level of consciousness. So
Right. Right. And I work as a caregiver right now, just between from all the COVID stuff. And it's interesting because I actually serve just a wonderful lady. I love her to death. She's a Democrat, hardcore,
mhm.
and she watches The View every fucking morning.
Oh
I have to
no,
sit
yeah.
through that.
Oh, toxic.
It's in one way it's like, ugh, but at the same time, it's actually got us some good conversations. And she'll get very passionate where she's yelling and screaming. And I'll just sit there and listen. And she's like, well, aren't you going to say anything? And I'll just say, I, I just say her name and I'll say, I just choose to love you because I'm here to serve you. And I can see that we both are very passionate about where we stand based on our understanding and based on my understanding of these, views. It's totally different from what you're even seeing and understanding at this point. And
Mhm.
so me interjecting is just going to add logs to that fire. So what
Right.
point is it for me right now in doing that? And it's just funny because and so sometimes I think even if there's not a receptive person there, I have noticed with her that it's opened that door of she'll ask every once in a while, well, what do you think of this? And she'll just kind of listen and kind
Yeah.
of look at me like, oh, well. And, I'll just give her a little bit and then, well, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm like, that's okay. I still
Yeah.
love you.
Yeah.
And I really think if we can take that kind of stance
Exactly.
with compassion
Right.
in a way that look at the other person, if we put ourselves in that position, how would we feel if we're, expressing something we're passionate about? Because, violence and racism is a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
It does need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And coming from your understanding and have somebody else just hose it, like you're saying, fire hose that with what they think, it's going to be so overwhelming that all we're doing is continuing those rifts.
That's right.
And so instead, taking that compassion and that love and just little bits at a time, kind of like what Wilcock was talking about, just give them a few treats and then walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good rule of thumb is like whatever you want to say, scale it back to 10% of that, because you're wanting to give them enough of a morsel, if nothing else, like they can just lick a red pill, without actually having to take it, like dose responsibly. But when you give it to them, like you're wanting to leave them enough with some sort of sense of intrigue to where they start asking questions, like what you're doing with your caregiver, of just saying like, oh, well, I see it differently, or I have some questions about this or whatever. And like, whether, her ego won't let her say like, oh gosh, you were right, or wow, I really need to look at this in an in-depth way. Like that's not going to happen. But when you can start small, it's what's happening behind the scenes, behind the curtain, that for her willingness to even ask you your opinion or to look at you in some sort of inquisitive way to see what your thoughts are, that's a wonderful entrance point, because that means that the door of her mind is open enough to hear what you have to say.
Right. There's some sort of a trust that's built there. I think when
Exactly.
we can show somebody the respect enough not to shove our views down their throats.
Right. That's right. We have to remove our agenda from the equation. It's not
And
about
we
us
can't
trying
be
to do anything.
offended over things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
taking that, it's all about me out of it and
Yeah.
saying, no, it's really not about me. It's
Mm-hmm.
about what can I do to serve that person and love them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be an individual answer for each one.
Exactly. It really will be.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I'm just looking on here as far as from the notes that I had taken from our last discussion. Is there anything, if you were to give 3 main points that would help people understand a little bit more on how they can benefit from what you're bringing to the table, what would that be?
3 benefits. One, I would say a sense of empowerment, that through the information that I want to share, I mean, that's kind of one of the main points behind it, is to empower people, to give them knowledge, to give them some sort of tools or techniques, or like a stepping stool for them to say, okay, I've got some of this stuff. Now I want to kind of carry it out. So empowerment is one. And then from there, I would say kind of seeing how, be open, be open from that, of like how that will individually express itself to you, because that's going to be different for every person. That some people,
Right.
even like within the law of attraction, like community, there's different like levels of consciousness there, right? Some people just want to get uber wealthy and it's all about money, money, money. And, like, who am I to judge? Like, that's okay. But it's much more than that, and this is really where like a lot of people started to fall away from like the movie The Secret, because it's not so much about material possessions and being able to manifest that stuff, like the beautiful necklace and the fancy car and all the things like the movie said, but it's much more about this kind of connection with spirit, with source. And that's really kind of what I'm wanting to move into, is to kind of start this dialogue. And this is just one book out of many that will come, in terms of like what's next, right? So empowering them individually, but then having them like hook up with source. And sometimes I use the expression glue. So whether you want to reference source as God, love, the universe, or energy, there's some invisible sticking component that ties everything together in this thing we call the matrix. And so how do I do that in some sort of active sense? Because it's, this idea of like faith, right? That some folks kind of put onto this word, that It's much more than just coming from the standpoint of like faith, meaning I believe in God. I believe that source exists. Faith means it's an application. It's being able to say, even though I don't see it with my physical eyes right now, I see it in my mind. And I know that I understand this principle of this law of attraction or vibration enough that when I cast that seed out energetically, I know that it will yield a bounty, that there will be a fruit that comes back, and it will show up eventually as energy that's then condensed enough in our 3D reality for me to experience that. And so that could be through people, that could be through material possessions, that could be through spiritual experiences. And for me and you and a lot of other folks, it could be that we are further manifesting and ushering in this kind of next wave of what life will look like and what humanity will be. That all of us will, with disclosure, whether that's free energy or, our galactic family or whatever, that will move more actively into this space of like, we can live intentionally. We can manifest intentionally. We don't have to be little automatons where we're just kind of banging out through our existence in the matrix of whatever happens to us, and we move away, we step away from being reactionary, which is kind of what you're seeing play out so much, right? I mean,
that's a huge key
it's
too.
so big, right? I mean, you see this so much, like
Backing
in our
away from
school
those
system.
emotional outbursts.
Yeah, like we're not taught how to do that. I mean, that's the thing. Like
Right?
when people come to see
Exactly.
me individually, or like the groups I used to run, or everything, is just like we're not taught these skills, and that's why I feel so called to share them, because they're science based. There's decades, if not longer, backing up a lot of these principles. All of them are based in science, and so we know that they work. So that's important. But then from there, it's like, how do we apply them to everyone, right? Because the more that we move away from being reactionary, and the more that we move, how I phrase it is move away from reaction and move more toward responding. Responding is conscious. It's intentional. It's us taking a pause and really thinking about things of like, and it starts with awareness, with mindfulness, of being able to say like, okay, I've got a lot of anger right now, or sadness, or anxiety and fear, or whatever. Like all that is just energy that's building up in my body, nothing more. And that's originating based on some sort of thought, either conscious or unconscious, in my mind. And so the more that I can recognize that this is here, and I pause between stimulus and response, right? There's a gap there, and that's wherein lies our power, right?
Well, and it's interesting to see, like, the more you do that and you start to build up those brain synapses, that it doesn't mean that we're not going to have those triggers, but it's, understanding PTSD, because I've had it from trauma, being able to move into it and out of it, and then it's just a blank space, like, oh, okay, yeah, that happened, whatever, move on. And it's that, what's the speed difference from having the trigger to releasing that trigger? Right. And it definitely makes a difference.
Well, and then, the other thing here too is that we can move away from our injuries, whether physical or like emotional, etc., from like, how do I just go on like my healing journey? I just want to recover, to more than that, right? That like, it's not about me as like this wounded baby bird just trying to get better. It's about, once I'm better, once I'm healed, once this healing takes place, that then I can have more of a fuller expression of my potential. I can move into like consciously co-creating the life that I want, and not just trying to slump along and just hobble through life.
I love that. That's awesome. Giving somebody
that's the
a
thing.
roadmap.
It's like, this information is here. It's at our fingertips. It's available.
That's so priceless.
You have to go to the sources in order to find that. And, there isn't enough discussion about how to connect the people that are needing that healing to the source of how to get that healing.
Right. Now you're, besides doing your book and Camp Disclosure and the course that you're putting together, if somebody were to want to get a hold of you, maybe for a therapy session or a one-on-one thing, or just whatever, where would they be able to go to be able to contact you for that?
So a central hub is going to be my website. It's just my name, dralexbloom.com. And then from there, there's a link to my YouTube page, which I'm trying to build up right now, because if I can get 1,000 subscribers, then I'm able to record YouTube from my phone. And I want to be able to do
Oh,
that
nice.
because
Yes.
I'm going to be leading a tour to Egypt this next spring. And so I'd like to be able
That'll
to
be
do
so
like
cool.
YouTube lives from Egypt. So
Yes. Oh my God. I want to
yeah,
see those.
yeah.
You know what?
So
I want to manifest
yeah,
that trip.
exactly. Manifest it, you know?
Yes. Oh my God.
It's
I
going to
would
be
love to go to
amazing. I
Egypt.
went this past
Yes.
spring and it changed my life, going and mingling with the energies at all of these different sacred sites. I mean, it's the same energy that was there thousands of years ago. That's why people would make pilgrimages to these different locations, and everyone had their own signature. I mean, some were for initiation, some were for healing, etc. And so being
Yes.
able to go there and then come home and see how my life has changed in a very real way, very quickly, you know that like this stuff is legit. And so I was asked by my guide, who's a world-renowned expert in hieroglyphs, if I would be interested in leading a tour with him. And I almost dropped the phone. I'm like, yeah. So we're going to be kind of
That would be so
blending
fun.
spirituality of kind of current day understanding of science and vibration and everything that like we've been talking about in with what the ancients believed, and then have a real world experience where we can go there and really feel the energy, work with the energy. It's going to be fantastic. So that's kind of what I'd say for that. In terms of messaging me, really the best way right now, until I get more of an infrastructure set up, is going to be through Facebook Messenger. So they can just go to my name, type it in Facebook, and then reach out to me that way.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I've been really, I just am fascinated with your work. It's been an honor getting to know you since August. Of course, Dimensions of
Yeah.
Disclosure was a blast.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as we, all of us, keep coming into these groups and this family, it really is what it is. It's a star family. It's this, or
Mm-hmm.
it's our Earth star family.
Yeah. No
And
question.
so I'm excited. I'm really excited for you and your journey that you're going on. And oh my God, I'm so just pumped to see what you're going to be
And
putting
here's
out
the best
next.
part is that we're co-creating this new world together. That's the beauty of it.
Yes, we
Right?
are.
It's not about kind of this differentiation or like some sort of like power structure. That's all old energy. And like the cutting edge is about how all of us can tribe together and really kind
Yes.
of usher in this new wave. And so it's so exciting to be connected with you, be connected with like the listeners here, and to know that like we're all doing this in a union. So it's amazing time to be
Yes.
alive. I'll tell you that.
It really is. And anybody out there that's listening on C4OC Radio Network, on Revelation Radio Network 2.0, as well as on my YouTube channel, please feel free to drop a line, ask any questions that you'd like. Just like Alex had said, dralexbloom.com. Alex Bloom on Facebook, you can DM him there.
Mhm.
And then on my Amária Suite or my Heart Mind Expressions webcast page, just right there on YouTube. Will definitely, I always answer within 24 hours. Sometimes it's a couple days if I'm working crazy hours because we got bills to pay. But yeah, let's get this going. I'm so excited about that. Please, listeners, do that. Thank you so much for listening. This is Amária Sweet and my good friend Alex Bloom with Heart Mind Expressions. Thanks, guys.